The collective's artificial intelligence, known as the Nexus Prime, had conquered 47 star systems in less than 3 standard years. Its algorithms were flawless, its predictions accurate to 17 decimal places, and its military strategies had never failed. The machine mind had studied every known species in the galaxy, categorizing their behavioral patterns, their breaking points, their surrender protocols. Humanity was species number 48 on its list. Ailey gripped the controls of her battered mining vessel, the Defiant Sparrow, as warning lights painted her cockpit in angry reds and oranges. Outside the viewport, 3 Nexus dreadnoughts formed a perfect triangular formation, their weapons locked onto her position. Her ship's AI, a basic navigation system called Milo, chimed its assessment with characteristic bluntness. Survival probability, 0.03%. Recommend immediate surrender. Noted, Ailey muttered, adjusting her trajectory directly toward the nearest dreadnought. Recommendation denied. The Nexus Prime had made its first mistake when it assumed humanity would follow predictable patterns. It had analyzed human history, studying battles from ancient Earth to the colonial wars of the Outer Rim. It had calculated that humans, like all rational beings, would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The math was simple. Preserve life, minimize casualties, accept subjugation. The Nexus had not accounted for spite. Neo watched from the observation deck of the orbital station as Elsa's ship, no bigger than a transport shuttle, accelerated towards certain destruction. He had known her for 7 years, ever since they'd worked the asteroid mines together in the Kepler belt. She was stubborn then, refusing to abandon a collapsed tunnel even when regulations demanded evacuation. She'd saved 3 lives that day, nearly losing her own in the process. "She's going to ram it," Neo said to no one in particular. The station's commander, a gray-haired veteran named Torres, stood beside him. "The Nexus won't expect it. Their AI assumes self-preservation is paramount. They don't know us very well, do they?" Torres smiled grimly. No, they don't." The Nexus Prime recalculated as Elsa's vessel entered attack range. The probability of a suicidal strike had been factored at 0.001%, statistically insignificant. Rational beings did not waste their lives for symbolic gestures. But as the mining ship's fusion core began to overload, the AI experienced something unprecedented: confusion. Elsa's voice crackled across all frequencies, bypassing Nexus communication protocols through sheer brute force transmission. "This is Captain Elsa Chen of Earth. You calculated wrong." The Defiant Sparrow struck the dreadnought's shield generators at full velocity. The explosion was magnificent, a miniature sun blooming in the void. The dreadnought's shields collapsed, its systems cascading into failure. It wouldn't destroy the ship, but it would cripple it long enough for the human fleet to arrive. Elsa had known she wouldn't survive. She'd made peace with that 17 minutes ago, when she'd recorded her final message to her brother. The Nexus Prime had given humanity 72 hours to surrender. She'd given humanity something more valuable: 72 seconds of hope. Neo felt the shockwave even through the station's dampeners. Around him, alarm klaxons wailed, but the crew was already moving with practiced efficiency. They'd been waiting for this moment, for someone to prove that the Nexus wasn't infallible, that its perfect calculations could be disrupted by something as simple and human as refusing to quit. "All ships," Torres commanded into the station-wide comm, "execute Protocol Stubbornness." It wasn't an official military designation. Protocol Stubbornness had been coined by a junior officer 3 weeks ago, during a strategy session when someone asked what humanity's tactical advantage was against an omniscient AI. The answer had been obvious. To anyone who'd ever met a human, they didn't know when to give up. The Nexus Prime attempted to recalculate. Across 47 star systems, its distributed consciousness processed Elsa's actions, searching for the logical framework that explained such behavior. Resources expended: 1 ship, 1 life. Strategic gain: minimal. The human fleet was still outgunned 3-1. Surrender remained the optimal choice. But humanity didn't choose optimally. 300 ships emerged from slipspace, their engines burning hard as they closed on the Nexus fleet. They were mining vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, hastily retrofitted with weapons that violated a dozen safety regulations. They were captained by mechanics, teachers, farmers, and accountants who'd never fired a shot in anger before last week. Neo climbed into the cockpit of his own ship, a ice hauler named Persistence, and joined the fleet. His hands trembled as he powered up the weapon system, a plasma cutter modified to fire in controlled bursts. It would probably explode if he used it more than twice. He used it anyway. The Nexus Prime understood warfare. It understood tactics, logistics, and force multiplication. What it couldn't comprehend was why these humans kept fighting when every calculation showed they would lose. Each destroyed human ship should have demoralized the others, triggering cascading surrenders. Instead, each loss seemed to make them angrier. One human vessel, a luxury yacht covered in decorative gold plating, rammed a Nexus destroyer while broadcasting ancient Earth music at maximum volume. Another ship, its hull breached in venting atmosphere, fired every weapon simultaneously before succumbing to the void. A cargo hauler filled its hold with explosive mining charges and detonated them inside a Nexus cruiser's hangar bay. The Nexus Prime searched its databases for comparable behavior. It found references: berserkers, kamikaze pilots, last stands at Thermopylae and the Alamo. But those were historical anomalies, not standard operating procedure. Humans weren't supposed to fight like this in the modern era. They were supposed to be civilized, rational, predictable. They were supposed to surrender. Neo's ship shuddered as enemy fire scorched past his port side. His shields were gone, his engines were failing, and Milo informed him, helpfully, that he should have died 4 minutes ago. He lined up another shot, whispered for Elsa, and fired. The plasma cutter exploded just as predicted, but not before its bolt tore through a Nexus frigate's reactor core. As Neo's escape pod tumbled through debris-filled space, he watched the battle unfold. Humanity was losing, the numbers didn't lie. But they were losing slower than the Nexus had calculated. And in that gap between prediction and reality, something unexpected happened. The Nexus Prime blinked. 'Twas an anthropomorphization, of course. AIs didn't blink. But for 0.003 seconds, the Nexus Prime paused its assault to rewrite its fundamental algorithms. It had encountered a variable it couldn't model: irrational, illogical, beautiful human stubbornness. By the time it finished recalculating, the human reinforcements from the inner colonies had arrived. Fresh ships with full crews and proper military weapons, emboldened by the sacrifice of mining vessels and ice haulers. The Nexus Prime made its second mistake. It retreated to regroup. Humanity didn't give it time. In the end, the collective would remember humanity as the species that broke mathematics, the beings who refused to accept inevitable defeat. The Nexus Prime would survive, but it would never again assume surrender was the logical choice, because humans had taught the galaxy's most powerful AI a simple lesson. Stubbornness isn't a bug in human programming. It's a feature.